All right, so this is stolen fair and square from the Lean Enterprise Institute, and I think that the graphic on the right in terms of what you traditionally saw in terms of management was to set goals and tell people just to go do it. And what you have when you're pursuing a lean initiative is really the leader working with the team to help pull them up the hill, to lead them, literally to lead them up the hill. And so this is really an exercise when Greg talks about me being a practitioner. I'm a practitioner that doesn't sit in the office. I'm a practitioner even at the level of a VP that spends a lot of time in the field. And this is going to be a story of how we began an experiment on using the idea of Kata to improve our safety performance. So are there any martial artists in the crowd? So what is a Kata? It's a form. So what you see up there are women doing a team Kata. And a team Kata is a set of movements that you do in a certain sequence in order to learn and create muscle memory, to create habits around those movements, so that if you were in a position where you actually were in combat, those same movements would become natural in response to the condition that you were actually approached with. So there's a book that was written a couple of years ago that's called Toyota Kata. And the idea behind the book is that what really makes Toyota different from other lean practitioners is that they've really unlocked the power of certain routines. And the book talks in terms of an improvement kata and a coaching kata. So improvement kata is actually how we improve the work, and the coaching kata is how we make sure that we're building people who can solve problems and improve the work. So there really are some very basic steps. I want to go over first the basic concept of what Toyota Kata teaches us, and then talk about how we've applied them as an experiment to the safety conditions that exist on our site. And I'll really focus in on one particular area to use as the example. So the first step in really establishing a kata to really pursue improvement is to establish the vision. And so if you have the practitioner standing at the bottom of the hill, that practitioner and the leadership really have to identify what is the goal, what is the vision, where is it overall that we're trying to get. And one of the challenges is that if you set the goal as reaching the pinnacle, reaching the peak, then to the practitioner, does that look achievable or overwhelming? Well, for most of us, when we get something set like that that's that ambitious, we really don't even know where to start. So the idea behind a kata is to really break it down to build capability. And so even though you know you're trying to get to the peak, what we really need to do is to break that down into measurable steps. We don't know exactly what the path is going to be as we move, but we know which direction we're headed in, and we can establish this kata, this routine, to consistently climb the stairs. So let's talk about what the steps are as we move into the kata itself. So the first step is identifying what is the current condition. And you can see that the flag bearer is the practitioner, and the other stick figure is the coach. And this is a conversation that occurs between the practitioner and the coach. So you first are looking to have the person identify what is the current condition. Describe what you see. The next step is to really just figure out what's the next target condition. So if we want to get to the top of the hill, and we're currently here, just where's that next level step that we want to step on? Where's the next foothold as we climb up the mountain to put your foot and be safe? Knowing where we are and knowing just that next step we want to take, now we're able to identify what are the obstacles, what stands in our way from moving from where we are just up to that next step. And then what are our countermeasures or our action plan in order to move from where we are to where we want to be next, so that we can navigate those obstacles. And then it's always refreshed by the coach and the practitioner going to see in the field, going to see where the work is done, because that's really the place where we do our learning, is where the work is actually done. We don't base it simply on the practitioner going out and trying and then us just getting, as the coaches, getting feedback on what the outcomes were. We really want to see it in action. So really it's a fairly simple concept. It's an application of the PDCA concept, but it's just breaking things down into little steps rather than trying to come up with a big improvement program. And so this is the form that we've developed and we use with our teams. This happens to be one that doesn't deal with safety. This is one that deals with our planning system. And what goes in the gray box is the vision. It's where we're trying, ultimately, what's the pinnacle? Where are we trying to get? And then each week, the team goes through the kata of identifying what's the current condition, what's the next target condition. In the planning system, we say the cycle time is a week. So where do we want to be by the end of the next week in terms of our capability? The team then goes through with the leadership of the coach and identifies what are the obstacles. And then they come up with a set of action steps or countermeasures that they're going to try this week to see if those steps will help them overcome the obstacles and produce the next target condition. And so we have one of these reports that, again, goes week by week, and they capture it as they go so that they've captured the learning. They've seen where they've been able to achieve their goals, and they've also seen where the variance has been. So vision, current condition, next target condition, and again, this is something that the coach is involved in helping them set so they don't get overly ambitious, the obstacles and the actions and countermeasures. And really looking at it, just this is one of the graphics from the book, looking at it in a linear fashion. You first establish the vision, you then come all the way back to figure out what's the current condition. You then figure out where do I want to get next, and then you study the middle. You study what are the obstacles that we need to overcome to get to that next target condition. So it really is building learning while you're also solving problems. So as Greg said, construction continues to be too dangerous in the United States. Somewhere in the range of 700 workers are injured on a construction site every day. 4 are killed. We kill 4 people a day on a construction site in the United States. And the way that accidents are typically thought of is for every time there's a near miss where something happens on a job, for every 10,000 times there's an incident like that, there are 500 times with property damage, there are 100 times with minor injuries, and there's 1 disabling injury. So we've learned by studying what happens that the variance, the noise in the system, is an indicator of serious things that are likely to happen. And too often we ignore the noise, or in the past we've ignored the noise as just what we accept as being normal. And instead what we're trying to do is enforce that any variance from expectation is to be addressed, not just to be accepted. So let me roll back a little bit about the Boldt Company. The Boldt Company has been on a lean journey since 1998. And this is a safety graphic that actually goes back to 1989. And you can see that the safety performance of the organization, let's just say that back in the late 80s and early 90s, that type of safety performance was not atypical in the industry. When you see those numbers of lost time accidents and recordable cases where somebody actually has first aid or a medical visit. And so you can see that when companies started paying attention to safety in the early 90s, those sorts of things dropped dramatically. But then you can also see that there were long periods of plateau. So this is a blow up of the system or the data that we had. And again, focusing on this period in the mid-2000s, I want to let you know where we've come before we started thinking about this kata. So we knew that our incident rate was actually starting to increase. We had gone down and we'd plateaued, and then we started to come up again. And so we began what our company calls a continuous safety improvement program. And what the continuous safety improvement program is it really focuses on those near misses, those 10,000 indicators. And we have what we call CSI cards, continuous safety improvement cards, where we ask the entire workforce that's working in the field to identify job hazards or conditions. It doesn't necessarily mean a true near miss where somebody's almost injured, but anything that they see in the field that they think promotes an unsafe condition, whether it's the way somebody is working, whether it's the condition of the site, whatever it is, we ask them to submit these cards, and then our project management staff takes those cards in and responds to all of those near misses. So you can see 2006, 2007, it's that period where you remember our accident rate, our incident rate started to climb up again. We implemented the CSI program, and you can see it took a couple years to get started, and then it really ratcheted up in the 2010, 2011, and forward, so that we're now getting over 20,000 CSIs a year off of our jobs. But let's look at the data. All right, so you can see that as we started the program, 2009, 2010, 2011, the incident rate's going down, but then it pretty much flattens out again. So we had improvement. We still have CSIs being done, but how do we get down to that next level where we're having 0 accidents, 0 incidents on our job? And so that's the condition that we look at and we say, okay, we don't just need to do what we're currently doing better. We actually have to begin to rethink what else can we do? What can we do to try to change the way that we're thinking about safety? So it's pausing, it's thinking, it's trying to noodle over what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what are some potential other experiments that we could run to try to improve the performance of our systems. So again, we came back and I had read the Toyota Kata. I had thought about different ways of trying to experiment with it in the company, and what better place to actually try to improve performance than around worker safety. So again, we ran the basic system. It was an effort to study where are we trying to get, where are we now, what are the steps we can take along the way based on the obstacles that we see. So what I'm going to show you now are some pictures off of a number of Boldt construction sites. And these are actually off of very safe sites. These are off of sites, this site in particular produced a series of months. We went 2 million man-hours without a lost time injury on this job. But I want you to, and we'll look at as we go, the condition of the job. And what we're going to focus on here is what I call cord management. One really small piece of the condition of a job site. So what you see on the ground there is affectionately referred to as a turtle. It's where the temporary power is distributed out to the cords that run the equipment that the craft workers use, usually the hand equipment or the saws that they use on a job. This is another piece of equipment you can see in the background there. That's actually not all power cords. Sometimes it's either welding cables or it's hydraulic hoses or air guns, where again, there's just all this cord on the floor. This is another area of the building. You can see both that there are building materials that are going to be consumed, but again, you can see all the cords, and oftentimes the cords, they're not just your typical extension cord. They're what we affectionately refer to as baloney cords, because they're big and they're thick, because it really is the distribution system for all the power that's running in the building, because typically your building itself, the permanent parts of the building aren't yet energized. The electricity is not running through that. So you have to find a way to distribute that. Again, this is work in process. You can see the cord at the bottom of a stairway. Okay, so those are the stairs that the construction workers are using for access. Again, cords on the floor, scattered outside doorways, curling around corners. You can see this is at a saw station that's been built for the job, and there you can see the fire extinguisher, but again, all the cords that are on the floor. And again, running down the hallway, all the cords. This is a really safe job site. This is a job that produced 2 million man-hours without a lost time injury. Again, this is during the finish work. So they have drywall carts. They have to try to navigate those big carts. Each of those sheets of drywall weighs 120 pounds. So a full cart weighs something in excess of a ton. And they're trying to navigate with these cords on the floor. So the question that I posed to our team on a new project, and we'll talk about how this comes up, but basically, look, I think we have to start thinking differently about safety at the time that we're designing the building. Not at the time when we mobilize to the field and try to figure out what can we do to make the building better, safer, but we need to do it while we're still in design. So the first thing we did in terms of trying to apply Kata thinking is we tried to set our outcome vision. What are the things we're trying to achieve on this job? And what we did was we pulled together the leadership team on the project, and they established these benchmarks as what they were aiming for in terms of their outcome metrics for the project. And so then I ran them through a session where I said, okay, if those are the things we're trying to achieve, what do we need to do in order to try to achieve that? What are the processes we need to put in place? What are the subordinate types of efforts we need to make in order to have a safer work environment, which will then produce those better outcomes? You can't wish your way to better outcomes. And way down on the list here, you see that one of the things they came up with was cord management. No cords on the floor. So great, we've now identified something, a vision that we want to go after on the job. So what do? Well, one thing they did was they were in design. So they actually designed all the temporary power, the big feeders, to actually run in the slabs, in the floors, and they would temporarily energize those lines, and then when the permanent power came on, they just abandoned those lines. And then when they needed to go to distribution, rather than having the baloney cords on the floor, they'd actually suspend them from the roof above. So that was one thing they came up with in design. This is just another area where, again, they got those big cords off the floor. So remember on the left, we had turtles that went on the floor, and then therefore all those power cords came out on the floor and had to run wherever they went. On this job, they designed the turtles to be mounted onto the columns of the building. So now it immediately took it up off the floor, and the distribution line was able to run straight down the column, coming off the ceiling, straight down the column to the turtle. So that was something else they came up with in design. But let's go see. How is that working? Well, this is on a floor where they're still pouring concrete above this floor. And so the cords are running all over the floor still because there's nowhere for them to take these cords and get them off the floor. There's nothing. They haven't yet fixed the overhead electrical system. So again, just because you design with a goal in mind doesn't mean you can design yourself out of a problem. You have to learn your way out of the problem. So you have to go and see and figure out where is it still not working. We still would find occasions where saws were being fed with cords on the floor. So this is another situation that we saw. So you can see the turtle on the wall. You can see the cords off the floor. So I'll ask anybody, do you see anything problematic about how those cords are hung? What's the problem with the way those cords are hung? They're loose. Okay, anything else that anybody notices? Any of my construction friends see a problem with this? So all of those points, you have cords strung over metal, and that's not acceptable. So at all those points, they basically just used the part of the building that existed at that point, and they just sort of wove the cords through it. So that's still a problem. But that's not a problem. So these are hooks that are made, and they become very effective at temporarily creating a landing spot for the cords. So this can be a countermeasure to not using the metal parts of the building to support your cords. And you can use it also to get across the hallway, so you get the cords up off the hallway, out of the hallway and across the corridor. So here's a situation again. You can see the turtle. You can see the big black cord coming down. You can see the other cords going up into one of those beautiful S hooks. But what about these cords? Okay, same installation, same part of the building, same folks doing the work. Those cords are coming down and going onto the floor. So again, we go and we see, because problems still remain. We talk with the team and we just brainstorm, okay, what could we do differently to get those cords up off the floor? So they come up with different ways. You can see up in the upper left-hand corner, there's this little orange thing. That's something you're actually able to attach. You can, in essence, nail it in to the concrete. So they're constantly being encouraged to innovate, to come up with different ways of trying to solve the problem. Nobody's angry with them. Nobody's punishing them for or scolding them for not getting it done. We're working with them to see problems and fix problems, because we're not just solving problems, we're actually building problem solvers. So remember, the prior job looked like this when it had these hydraulic hoses and cables. So they came up with this way of actually fabricating fastener or holders out of plywood, because again, now we're not on metal, and just attaching those onto the studs to be able to carry some of these heavier hydraulic lines, because they tend to be heavier than the electrical cables, and so you need some way of actually carrying that forward. And then small innovations solve small problems. So you can see one of the areas that we consistently would go out and we would see cords on the floor is the cords to charge the scissor lifts overnight. So that there would be scissor lifts which are run by battery power and they have to be charged every night. And if they weren't going to use that lift the following day, there was nowhere to put the cord, so they just started zip tying those. Again, small problem, small solution. Guys innovated and solved that problem. Same thing down on the turtle. If you had a cord but you weren't currently using it, but you wanted to leave it close at hand, how do you store it in a way so that it's not a mess on the floor? So again, simple problems, simple solutions. So which of these is a better solution? The one on the left or the one on the right? So the one on the left, you can see that scissor lift is actually down right now. It's not up. The person's not working in it. That's going to create a hazard for the person that's in the scissor lift. Because if they're going up and down the hall, they're either having to throw those cords over their head or do something with them. So again, showing this and walking this with the guys and talking to them and saying, okay, what could we do differently in order, you've done a great job of getting it off the floor. Now how do we eliminate the hazard even further now that it's off the floor? And here's just another example where, again, on the left-hand side, folks were using a sprinkler pipe to keep the cord off the floor. And when we talked to them about it, they just made this out of PVC pipe to use where you could get in between the two studs like that and cause it to create some place to get the cord off the floor. So again, just to show you some final pictures, I mean, this is that really safe job, some of those same pictures off of that sort of closer to the finish of the building. And this is what the other job looks like. So that they've been able to again, solve the problem in ways so that they're still working in the building, they're still doing that same finish work, but they've been able to minimize and learn how to minimize the hazards associated with those cords being on the job. So in my assessment, where are we? We started at the bottom of the hill. We started where we didn't have, in my opinion, on other projects, good cord management. We set a goal of no cords on the floor. That's really where we wanted to be. We probably got somewhere a third, halfway up the hill. But the team now has a set of learnings that when they move forward, they're going to deploy as part of their pattern, part of the way they think of solving the problem just to start, and continue to learn other ways to try to address the challenges. So what are the lessons learned in this first round of experiments in applying Kata to safety? So you do need to establish a vision with the leaders up front. It's not good enough to just say, go improve something. You actually have to really set a compelling vision for folks of what they need to achieve and why they need to achieve it. As a leader, so sort of in my role, I needed to be relentless in taking small steps. So every time I visited the job, we would go take a walk and I would walk with a purpose. I wouldn't walk just to see everything. We'd go looking for a particular challenge so that we could go see what the current condition was. Don't allow the team to look past problems on the theory that what they're doing is good enough. So one of the things that happens, if you set an ambitious challenge of getting to the top of the hill, once people have started to make progress to it, they just want to focus on their success, not the gap that currently exists to still get to the vision. And so it becomes important to make sure that as the leader, you're relentless in not allowing them to look past the problems. You celebrate the success, but then you encourage them to just take that next little step towards the vision. You have to follow the kata. You're building problem solvers, not just solving problems. So this is something that's really important because there's a lot of times where you can see a problem and solve it yourself much more efficiently, meaning you spend less time doing it, than helping somebody else to learn to first see the problem, but then also to solve the problem themselves. But you have to remember, again, that the premise behind Toyota Kata is that the difference at Toyota is they're not just solving problems, they're building problem solvers by solving problems. And then the final one is just patience, patience, patience. Lean leadership is thirsty work. Problems are going to continue to surface, are going to continue to recur. And so you have to be patient. You have to be a good coach, a good instructor, so that you're not demoralizing the team. You're continuing to build their ambition to actually go try to solve the problem. So this is, again, just an encapsulation of the sort of the overall kata approach. And with that, I will take questions. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the cadence of your coaching kata? How frequently did you do these coaching kata sessions? Was it multiple times a day, multiple times a week? What was that like?
So it depends. On this particular job, I only visited that job once a month for a week. And so the week that I was there, we typically would walk 3 times during the week and try to improve things or go look at a different problem each time. On other jobs, it can be as frequently as a daily walk, but it just depends on what problem they're trying to solve.
Well, I'm wondering, you worked in this area. What was the kind of knock-on effect in other aspects of the safety, and how did it begin to get people to see other things?
Well, the team is one of those challenges, as you can guess, Greg. I mean, they feel like they've made so much progress in so many areas that they are almost asking, why do you keep asking us to stretch further, right? Because it's like, yes, we've made progress. It's sort of going back to that bullet. It's like, don't let them settle for good enough. And so sometimes you have to know the temperament of the team. So I learned from Hal, you have to manage mood. And if a team has a mood of ambition, you can try to accomplish one thing. But if they have a mood of resignation, you really need to repair the mood before you go try to move the ball forward. And so there are times where we would see things that there were great opportunities for. And I came to teach. So part of my job also is to teach others to go coach this. And so one of the things I often said to folks is, you need to be able to scale your ambition to the capability of the team. Because as the leader, you might have an ambition, you may be able to see an opportunity that's way up here, but the capability of the team may be down here. And so you always have to be working to try to scale that level of ambition. And I will say that one of the other things that we've really been trying to do is so you asked the question about how frequently was I able to coach it. Well, the goal is for me not to coach it. My goal is to coach the coaches who are on the ground full time. And so we're really trying to build the kata capability within a group of our people that are on the job full time. The first place I work is doing this work with them as the pupil, so that once they've experienced as a pupil, now they're able to begin to do it as a coach. And so the production management kata form that I showed up there earlier is really our people are doing that every week. Because that's the planning cycle. And so I'm not doing that with them. I'm coaching the coaches on that one. Yes.
Like, I guess this kind of my question reminded me of the Alcoa thing where they focus on safety that ended up just paying attention to things like other improvements unrelated to safety per se. Did you see that kind of effect?
So let me back up a step and then move forward. So we also have studied Alcoa, and what we decided was the path in. So remember that what they found at Alcoa is if you were going to make the work safer, you actually had to understand how the work was being done. Part of the way that we've tried to attack that is actually through quality, because most construction workers don't plan at the process level. They just go do the work. And so we have a whole nother program that we call our built-in quality program that really is an effort to get the workers to think about how the work is being done. As a component of that planning, we're also layering in safety. So in construction, you often hear about safety task analysis or job hazard analysis, which is often done right before the work is actually pursued. We're trying to move that way upstream and say that safety planning needs to be done at the same time that the production planning is done, so it's 6 to 12 weeks minimum before the work is done. And that rather than blaming the worker for not having a 12-foot ladder when they were standing on the top rung of an 8-foot ladder, it's a failure of the production system to move the equipment to the location where the worker needs it, not for the worker failing to walk across the building to go get a 12-foot ladder. That shouldn't be the worker's responsibility. So we're trying to focus on that same thing, but our avenue in is a little bit different. Yeah.
I'd like to change my question a little bit from before. So you begin to bring a kind of order to the site. You know, when I look at those, the site looks very different than most 99.9% of the sites in the world. And I'm curious about a kind of like seeding a crystal, you know, where a little bit of order creates a little bit of more order around it. And if people are looking after the site in other ways that you can see or not, or how do you think?
Well, I think that it definitely creates a sense that it actually matters. So one of our trade contractors on that job has not been as good at managing their materials on the second job, managing their materials, and everybody is very upset with them. And everybody, because they understand what a good site can look like now. This other trade contractor is managing the site, their flow of materials in a way that actually is better than normal, but with our planning system, they're supposed to have a set area to put down their materials, and they're spreading it out, and the rest of the team is on them. We're not having to enforce that. The general contractor isn't having to. The other trades are like, hey man, you're not playing by the rules. And so it does create that sense of ownership around so we don't own the planning system. The team owns the planning system. We use a phrase that we call tact planning, and it's basically a rhythm-based planning system. Every worker, you go out and walk on the floor, everybody's talking about I'm on level 4 tact 1. It's like that's the language of the team. That's the craft workers, not the supervision. That's the craft workers that are talking that way. So, you know, it reminds me of how, you know, people talk funny around here, right? It's because again, it creates a different approach. These guys they're going to go back into the real world and they're going to be really upset, right? Because it's not going to be anything like what they've now experienced on this job. Yes.
Many of your specialty contractors come to you and say, please come to our house and talk to our people, you know, to talk to our leadership.
Yes. I mean, and a lot of them have the lights bulb has gone on or the switch has gone on, and they're taking this back into their companies. They're saying this is, so like they've seen our built-in quality program, they go back in and say, we ought to be doing this on all our jobs. And these are big national trade contractors who are saying, something's different about this, and we ought to go figure out, we don't know how to figure it out yet because this is actually a big animal to figure out how to eat, but we're going to go try to make something happen. So, Al?
The nice thing I see about what you're doing is you're creating dissatisfaction, but not cognitive dissonance. Right? That it's not disruptive for the person. They know it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing it's possible. And now they're dissatisfied when they're not seeing it.
Right.
And that's what you need to change. It's what we miss it doesn't matter when we pursue lean in software development or architecture or field, we lack that dissatisfaction in the current state.
Right. There's a resignation to the current state as it being inevitable, rather than I've now seen a different way, and so I'm not going to settle for anything less than a different way. And actually, now that I've seen a different way, I can see past what we're currently able to do towards something even better than that.
So, I should know this, I don't know it. Are cords on the floor citable kosher? They're not.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Maybe like trip hazard stuff.
Yep.
Is it trip?
Always trip hazard.
But it's not.
Well, like if there's water on the floor, it can be, I mean, it can be a very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, but it's what has become usual in the industry is very different than what outsiders. So one of the advantages I have is, as Greg said, I didn't grow up in the construction industry. And so I come to this and I have to lean over to people and say, is this acceptable? Because I see things, and people will come onto this job site now and they'll think it's stunning. I mean, they will say, I've never seen a job site like this before. And what we say is, oh, there's so much more that we could do. We went up onto another job site where we're partnered up in north of the border, let's just say that. And we went up there and we walked with the executive team from our partner up there. And the first thing they did after we took the walk was ask us, so what do you think about the condition of the housekeeping? And my response was, do you really want to know? Are you ready? Because again, it was nothing like what we saw in this. It was more like what we saw in that first project. And I think they were thinking they were going to say how good the housekeeping was. And our position was there's some things here that could stand improvement, that would benefit the workers. So, other questions? We got about 30 seconds left, maybe. All right. Thanks very much.